color.
Okay, hello, good afternoon, welcome to the practice of art and science. Let me give you 3 reasons why we're here. First, art and science is in the air. Again, I would say, after a hibernation period of, let's say, 200 years, where art and science had been moving into different directions, digging themselves ever deeper into their specialized, closed systems, creating a gap of misunderstandings, of lost common languages. Finally, they're converging again. It will be a musical performance. I didn't know that, but now we see. They say that at the entrance to the Platonic Academy, there was the sentence, "Let none but geometers enter here." Well, the role of mathematics and consequently of computer science is, of course, playing a crucial role in that game. First, in creating barriers, and then in bringing the 2 spheres together again. Second reason why we're here. In 1979, when Ars Electronica was created, this was the birth moment of an evolving ecosystem that in its genetic code already had embedded this type of encounter, this type of dialogue between the sciences, technology, art, and society. When then in 1996 the Futurelab was added, that ecosystem got ever richer. And when in 2011, Ars Electronica entered into a cooperation with CERN, the particle accelerator institution near Geneva in Switzerland, things got rolling, things gained momentum. First, it was the Pre-Ars Electronica Collide at CERN program that allowed artists to go to the facilities of CERN and have residencies there, and then at the Futurelab in Linz to develop projects. This was like the overture for what came next, the weaving of a Europe-wide network of science and cultural organizations, with Ars Electronica serving as a kind of mothership, helping forge that network, forge the alliances that were necessary. Important to note that from the very beginning, from the very inception of that network, it included major scientific institutions in Europe, like CERN, like the European Southern Observatory, like the European Space Agency or the Fraunhofer MEVIS Institute. And it included at the same time a number of significant cultural institutions with long track records in working with media, art, and working with art and science. Finally, the third last reason that brings us here to this very moment is a residency project, a series of residency projects that became possible through that European Digital Art and Science Network, with also help and co-funding from the European Union. Between 2015 and 2017, a number of residencies took place. We will today look at experiences and lessons from this outstanding series of residencies. Not only staying on the experiential level, but also strive to learn from that, to learn from what in fact turned out as a learning experience for all partners involved. And also, this is the moment to present a book we brought out fresh from the printing press, The Practice of Art and Science, a book that covers not only in documentary style all the projects, all the cultural institutions and the involved activities, but also tries to bring together the different stakeholders, their voices, their insight and their learning. It's not a cookbook for art and science encounters, but we hope it is a useful tool for anybody who wishes to involve themselves in adventures of this kind. Well, today, this afternoon, we will go through this in 3 rounds. Round 1 will be devoted to the latest residencies. We'll have the artists here and the representatives of the different institutions. So we'll be able to hear the stories told from different sides. Okay? Could be interesting. And then we will speak to 2 people from cultural institutions about an important element in that whole game, the role of curatorial guidance, of curatorial competence in that encounter. Do we need curators in this? Do we need a third party? We will discuss that question. And finally, trying to reflect the entire encounter, the role of residencies in what is actually going on behind the surface. So far, the plans for this afternoon. I would now like to invite to join me on stage for the first round Aoife van Linden-Tol, Aoife. Aoife, as you can see, welcome, comes directly from, I was about to say the laboratory, but that's not the right term, the explosion site. It's maybe also not exactly the term, but yeah, here we go. Yes, she might have to leave for that site a little earlier than the end of the conference because it's work ongoing as we speak, and it's all in the preparations for tonight.
Yes, it is. We're in the middle of setting up right now, so I jumped in a taxi and I'm ready for anything. So if you need an explosion, I've got everything you need.
And I would like to ask to join me Sarah Petkus. Sarah didn't come alone, but brought company to the residency and to our conference. Yeah. Okay, next I would like to invite Karen O'Flaherty and Claudia Mignone from the European Space Agency. Ladies, please. The two ladies were at ESA in charge of taking care of the other two ladies, and to give an understanding, the ladies are physicists, cosmologists, working in the communication of science, the outreach of science. Okay, I will hand over the microphone now to you to give us a short introduction into the setting where the two artists went, what ESA is actually about, and for that here we go. Stage is yours.
Thank you, Andreas. I wanted to set the scene for the discussion later on about the residencies by giving a short introduction to the European Space Agency and to ESTEC, which is the site where the residency was held, and also to the Space Science Programme, which is the context in which the residencies were envisaged. Exploring the universe and sending satellites into space in a safe and sustainable environment for everybody is one of the main challenges for all of us, for modern nations these days. And to achieve the challenge, we have 20 European nations have pooled their resources to form a type of united space in Europe. The European Space Agency has 50 years of experience as an agency. We have tested, designed, operated and launched over 80 satellites. ESA people work in 8 sites in different facilities throughout Europe. So space science is just one of many domains that the European Space Agency is active in. We're also involved in human spaceflight, and at the moment the ESA astronaut Paolo Nespoli is flying on the space station up above us. Next year Alexander Gerst will fly there, another European astronaut, and for part of his 6-month term he'll be the commander. We're involved in the exploration of the Moon and Mars, observing our own planet. We've also, as I said, we test, launch and operate spacecraft. We promote excellence in technology, and we're involved in innovations with telecommunication and with navigation. But space science is special in the agency because it's a fundamental activity, and it's one in which all the member states participate. And ESTEC, so the European Space Research and Technology Centre in Noordwijk in the Netherlands, is where space scientists' dreams come true. This is where we test our spacecraft. They're designed. We have experts who monitor the development with academia and with industry. And this is where Aoife and Sarah had their residencies. So after we test the spacecraft at ESTEC, they're sent to the launch site. And many of the spacecraft are launched from our spaceport in French Guiana or from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. And this one here is the launch of Gaia. This is our galaxy surveyor, which was launched in December 2013. So, when the satellites go out into space, there are emissaries for exploring the universe. The picture here is of the comet 67P Churyumov-Gerasimenko, which some of you may remember was explored by the Rosetta mission between 2014 and 2016. But we don't have any lack of ambition when it comes to exploring the universe. So we probe back to the very first moments after the Big Bang. We explore galaxies far and close to home. We explore our own galaxy. We look at the stars, at dust and gas, at planets that are being born around other stars. And we also explore our own star, the Sun, and the planets, the moons, the comets, and asteroids in our solar system. So ESA has a long heritage that we're very proud of, and a number of achievements. For example, we pioneered the science of space astrometry with the Hipparcos mission. And the Giotto spacecraft, when it flew by Comet Halley in 1986, brought ESA into the era of deep space exploration. One of the many memorable moments is the first landing of a probe on a far distant moon, and that was the Huygens probe, which back in 2005 landed on the surface of the largest moon of Saturn, that's Titan, and sent back pictures from the surface. So in the middle there you see an image taken by the probe from the surface of the moon. And the picture on the right-hand side is an artist's impression of the probe on the surface. It's probably worth mentioning that the spacecraft that brought Huygens to the moon, to the Saturn system, is coming to the end of its 20-year voyage in the solar system. And in 5 days' time, it will actually plunge into the atmosphere of Saturn, where it will evaporate and be destroyed. But it leaves behind a huge legacy of knowledge about Saturn and the rings and the moons of the system. Another highlight is the Rosetta mission. Back in August 2014, it was the first spacecraft to rendezvous with the comet. And then in November of that year, it deployed a probe, the Philae probe, onto the surface. This was the first soft landing on a body. The probe took a picture from the surface, took several pictures, but the picture here on the left, you can see the leg of the probe just photobombing the photo. And the mission itself, the Rosetta mission, ended in September last year when the spacecraft descended onto the surface. And the picture here on the right is one of many that were taken during the descent, and this is about 5 kilometers from the surface of the comet. So today, we also have a fleet of very active missions. We have Mars Express, which was the first European-only mission to a planet that arrived at Mars in 2003 and recently celebrated its 5,000th day in orbit. And we also have the Gaia mission, which is our galaxy surveyor, which is looking to measure positions and motions and characteristics of over 1 billion stars. So last year, this map was published by Gaia. It shows the positions of over 1 billion stars in our galaxy. It's the biggest all-sky map to date. And next year, it'll be supplemented by the motions of the stars. And at that stage, we'll be able to truly explore our galaxy in 3 dimensions. But we also look to the future. So in the next few years, we look forward to the launch of Bepi Colombo to the planet Mercury. We have Cheops, which will study planets around other stars. We have Solar Orbiter, which will look at our own sun up close. And the James Webb Space Telescope, which will investigate the first light in the universe and out to probing stars being born around, planets being born around stars. In addition to the space science program, we also have the exploration program. And this is mainly to do with exploring the Moon and Mars. One of the upcoming missions here is the ExoMars program, or ExoMars 2020, where a rover will be brought to the surface and will try to answer one of the scientifically most challenging questions of our time, which is there life, or has there ever been life on Mars? And what's special about this rover is that it can drill down to 2 meters under the surface. And if there is evidence for previous life, then it should be protected. It should be found there, protected from the radiation at the surface. There's also a spacecraft which arrived there in October, which is the Trace Gas Orbiter. And that will do science in orbit, but it'll also act as a communications relay for the rover. So we have a very rich and diverse program at the European Space Agency. But I wanted to leave you with one thought, which is we're now in what's referred to often as the era as Space 4.0. And what that means is that space is no longer solely the domain of governments, of spacefaring nations, but it's also been expanded to include private companies, academia, industry, citizens, cultural stakeholders. To answer the calls of Space 4.0, ESA is asked to inform, to inspire, to interact, and to innovate. And this was what we wanted to bring to this collaboration with Ars Electronica and the European Art and Digital Network. And I think this is also what they brought to us. Thank you.
Yeah, well, this is the stuff that science fiction is made of, huh? What an institution to go to. You have prepared some material.
Yes. So, shall I? This is it's a series of recollections and. Probably no. A series of pictures and memories and a little bit of documentation of the residencies of Aoife and Sarah. So if this is shall I introduce the pictures, but you're all welcome to yes, just okay. So, as Karen mentioned, we were invited by Ars Electronica in about a year and a half ago to join this the European Digital Art and Science Network, and we were really thrilled and honored to do so because we've had a number of contacts. We've been contacted by a number of artists who are interested in the work that is done by scientists and engineers at ESA. And this residency offered us the chance to explore and experiment in a full formal setting the potentiality of this collaboration. So we opened, there was an open call, and there were 139 applications. And the jury last summer, in August, selected Aoife and Linden. she's sitting here, with their project Starstorm as the winner to be the artist in residence. Starstorm is site-specific performance using explosions that will premiere this evening. So the lucky ones among you and the other festival visitors will experience what we're all looking forward to, a fantastic journey through the phenomena that happen in stars and across the cosmos. And then there were also a lot of very, very interesting projects that were submitted to this open call. There were 6 honorary mentions from the jury, and one of them was very interesting, so interesting that it was also decided to be invited for a residency at ESTEC. And you can see here Sarah and the project, because the project is Noodle Fit, is sitting on her lap. And so here are a few pictures from our first encounter with Aoife. So the title of this first section of the conference is just a flyby or a rendezvous, which actually refers to the Rosetta mission that Karen mentioned earlier, which was the first space mission, the rendezvous with the comet, as opposed to previous missions that had only performed flybys, so just passing by for at high speed, taking data for a very short time. And Rosetta stayed there for 2 years. So if I didn't quite stay 2 years, even though I imagine... That's true. But we can definitely say that her residency was a proper rendezvous. And as with every rendezvous, the first part is getting to know each other. So here are pictures from, we had 2 short visits of Aoife at ESA sites at the end of last year. So the first visit, the first actual meeting we had with her was on a very special occasion, that is the arrival at Mars of the ExoMars mission that also Karen mentioned earlier. And that was, there was a special event on that occasion at the European Space Operations Center in Darmstadt, Germany. So Aoife was invited to participate to the event and experience one of the most exciting activities that happened. So seeing the mission reaching a very exciting milestone. And then later she also came for a second short visit, but this time to ESTEC, which is the facility that you saw in Karen's presentation in the Netherlands by the dunes. And that's where the missions are designed, developed, and come to life, basically. And there she visited so the pictures that you see in this collage. Can you see? As Aoife in a one-to-one scale model of the European model of the International Space Station. So this was very, yeah, it's very impressive to visit. But in fact, I think the most impressive experience that she experienced on that visit was to realize that space scientists mostly work in offices, and that they spend most of their time writing and debugging code. So for her first proper long visit, we also gave her an office. And she stayed there for 3 weeks in March, this March. And during that time, she already met some of the scientists in the first couple of visits, but then in that visit it was really dedicated to having meetings and delving into the research that is done in stellar physics, in solar physics, plasma physics, all the processes that she was interested in to create the dramaturgy of the show that we will see tonight. So she had a series of meetings with scientists, she attended lectures, she had sketches, she sketched on the board. We also discussed about possibly having an activity that would involve the scientists back. So inviting the scientists into the art, but for this first 3 weeks, it wasn't quite the case because it was really important to focus on, for Aoife, she can confirm, to focus on getting all the information and absorbing. She also looked at the sun through, well, the sun projected as seen through a telescope. So there was a full immersion into the science. Then she went back to her studio, and she came back after two months. And then it's probably, these are some of the most memorable experiences of the residency, because these are, again, informal conversations between Aoife and space scientists that work in ASTIC. If I'm not mistaken, Aoife, did you say that you also introduced something new in your artistic practice, that is to let people into the scripting and the definition phase of the performance? So she came back with a number of with a rough script and scenes for different acts of the performance, and then organized a series of brainstorming sessions, inviting the scientists on site to interact with her and react on what she was presenting, what she was planning to do in the performance, both from the scientific perspective, so is the physics correct, but also on an emotional side. And that was very beneficial. We'll talk about some results of evaluation of the project, like interviewing some of the scientists we've interacted with, with the artists, and that was very, very beneficial in the sense of people coming together and talking about colleagues who work on completely different research subjects, talking together, discussing, brainstorming about subjects that they wouldn't perhaps normally do. So that was a very important role of the residency. And then we also had this very exciting aspect of bringing the art to the scientists. So these are pictures from a workshop that Aoife will probably talk a little bit later. And in this workshop, the scientists could experience her her artistic work, got their hands dirty as well, but also from conceptual work, from bringing material to making something out of it. And then there was live art intervention, also that involved not only the scientists, but also everyone who works at ESA and was present on that day could stop by. So it was engineers, administrator, all sort of the whole spectrum of people who work at ESA and participate in this activity that didn't involve explosions, because we were not allowed to, she was not allowed to use explosives on site, but still people could make their mark on and create an artwork together with her. So Andreas, I have some other pictures about Sarah, but shall we, yes.
Aoife has brought a video, which we are briefly going to show. I told you first about the different views, and here we go. We should have sound, huh? Do we have sound on this? Yeah.
I am here at the European Space Agency in Noordwijk in Holland. I've been holding some amazing brainstorm sessions with the scientists to discuss the ideas around the project and really get some feedback from them, see how the ideas trigger their relationship with the science that they're doing, and see if they can contribute towards the ideas in a kind of statistical way or in a way that can enhance the performance and the detailing of the performance. I want to set off a load of smoke bombs. Red, yellow, orange, black. They're all mixing together and they're swirling around and you're in the middle of it.
I can find myself immediately there. That's an explosion of a supernova, big one, like that one.
Yeah.
That you have on the left, okay?
Yeah.
It's noisy and it's powerful. It's
Yeah.
a very big star, the sister of that
Yeah.
one, which has not exploded yet.
Yeah.
And it's extremely massive and extremely powerful. And the ultraviolet radiation is going through all of that cloud. And is actually getting rid of it. So this is dead now, 8 million years, and this will die 10 million years. So it has 2 million years to do all of this, to this effect. And if we are lucky, we can see it happen.
I held a workshop with the scientists last week, which was great. Sort of gave them a little insight into how I work in my practice and got their hands dirty and got them making stuff. And tomorrow we take the artwork that they've made and we're going to smash it and create some impacts on that work. So that's quite exciting, and it's a bit of an open session where lots of people from ESTEC, which is the European Space Agency facility that we're in now, the technical centre, a lot of people can come past and join in.
So you are going to smash the UN declaration, the Declaration of the Human Rights.
Today we're not allowed to have explosives here. We have an alternative method of creating lemon bombs.
She's a
Double trouble.
That's great splashing action. I've got going.
Splashes are us.
The project isn't really descriptive and it really literally transformative. It is much more emotional, it's much more experiential, so I want people to feel like they're inside of the things that are happening, and it's a bit more abstract. Oh my God! As I imagined it, at least in some ways, I wanted to take people on this journey of very delicate explosions, very meditative explosions, and then also take them to the big, high-impact stuff that really shakes your bones and feels the heat on your face and makes you, really feel the awe that you feel when you think about outer space.
The art of engaging scientists in a conversation. Yeah? I mean, your piece is about many things, and the residency is about many things. But what really strikes me when we look at how to make this work, this encounter we're speaking about constantly, you brought a number of really interesting elements into that, triggering the conversation, triggering emotional response from the scientists, from the engineers. Did you have all that planned? And how did that go along with the work process?
It was planned in the sense, I think I'd always wanted to do some kind of workshop or interactive event. I didn't know what that would be, and that the first visit really informed the second of the long visits in that respect. And also, I never, like Claudia mentioned, I never opened my process up before. It's a very, very private process. When I make work, I spend a lot of time thinking, I let it spend a lot of time imagining, and I get it right. And when it's right, I show it to people. And I've never, ever invited anybody, not my best friend, not another artist. I don't collaborate. I collaborate on other things. I've collaborated with theatre, I've collaborated with writing. I've never collaborated on my art, my explosive artwork. So it was really scary to do the brainstorming sessions, especially. Workshops, of course, I've done workshops before, but the brainstorm sessions were really motivated by the desire to engage the scientists in a way that really fed the project, because they have more knowledge than I do. And as much as I can try to learn in an hour conversation and through my research, there's also this thing, everybody's got their thing, right? They've got the things that they love, they've got the things that trigger them. And when you talk to people about their work, they tend to talk in quite a systematic way. This is what I do, this is the projects I'm working on, these are the research. And that in and of itself is already amazing, and already had the most really incredible conversations with people. But to bring out those nuances of people and get their immediate reaction, I just wanted to get everyone together and just let them be a bit free with the way they were thinking. So I did 4 brainstorm sessions, and some of them worked better than others. It was kind of, people could turn up or not, and some of them were quiet, and you had a bit more of a one-on-one, or 2 or 3 people. And then the last one was really great. There was quite a lot of people in the room, and I thought, okay, I really need to get people a little bit more physical and a little bit more freed up. So as soon as they came into the room, I said, okay, if you could be an explosion, any explosion in the universe, what would you be? And you have to draw it on the wall. So it just kind of got everyone up and drawing and talking about their favorite thing and what they really loved. And everyone got so enthusiastic because, they're so passionate about it. And that was really useful when I then went on to speak about my ideas. People could really respond in a very immediate way, subconscious way, without thinking, which was really important to get the best instinct of what the performance might be like and how it could be influenced.
Could you tell us a little bit about the piece you developed, how it related to things you learned there from the process you described, from the missions, from the science? Could you give us a few hints without giving away too much?
Yes, so I could talk a little bit about the piece that I mentioned in the video, which is called Lost in the Photosphere. So the way the performance works, it's kind of like a piece of music with different movements in it. So there'll be little different explosions happening one after the other. And one of them, Lost in the Photosphere, is really about being inside this space. The photosphere is the area of the sun that we can see, so it's where the photons escape from. And I think it's about 500 million miles deep. Am I right, Claudia? Miles. Anyway, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's where all the photons escape from, and we can't see any further than that inside the sun. And there's a technique in the 90s that became big, I think, or even maybe before that. I was talking to Bernard Fleck, who was in the field for a very long time, and he described the helioseismology technique, where you look at the ripples in the same way you would look at waves or things that are happening in disruptions in water, to try and figure out what's happening deeper underneath the surface. And as I was talking to him about this, he kind of went, well, you know what, at one point we kind of lost it all. We realized that the technology that we were using, or something to do with the way that they were working the concept out, or was wrong. That actually the cause or something, I can't remember the details, but it basically was all turned upside down. And this happens in science quite a lot. You go into an area of research knowing that your area of research, all the groundbreaking work you did, could, and you know, we're talking about people's lifetimes. They spend their whole careers working on one idea, and they could retire thinking, great, I've done my work, I've contributed to the field of science, and then 5 years later it all gets turned around. And I got this real sense of chaos and this sense of acceptance about the science world, that's how they work. And then he said, well, you know, now they're re-looking at it and they're finding new ways to maybe revisit the technique. So there is still people working with this technique. But it's really like, you know, you just don't know what's going to happen. And so when I wanted to create this sense of being in the photosphere with all these smoke bombs, and then also I wanted to create a sense of confusion, a sense of disruption, and a sense of chaos. Like there's always this and when you're researching as well, I always find this, I don't know if anybody else does, but I tend to research and research and research, and you know, you're kind of going along these different paths and tangents, and it's all very clear, and then you get to this moment where you don't know what anything is about anymore, and you kind of lose yourself in everything that you've been doing, and then eventually you come through the other side and it all starts to consolidate and make sense again. So I kind of wanted the moment in the performance to be like that. So it was a real balance between the science and a kind of an emotional reaction to the conversations that I had, and the sort of imagination of being in that space.
When I listen to you describing this process, it comes to my mind, I mean, the two spheres at first glance, scientists, artists, seem quite different. Yeah? Systematic approaches, long-term planning, blah, 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 and artists are considered chaotic, spontaneous, etc. Considered, of course. When I look at your work and hear your descriptions, I get the feeling that some of the commonalities, some of the shared space, shared language, which is there, shines through. How do you experience that? How different do you feel those spheres to be, or how maybe close after all?
I mean, I think I spoke to you about this before, which is that, I mean, I felt very at home at Aztec. I felt very at home talking to people, and I have a kind of thing where I don't really, the science and art are very useful distinctions, and we create definitions in the world in order to help ourselves know what each other are talking about, and it would be really difficult to talk about things in as much detail and nuance that we do if we didn't create all these definitions and domains in which we work. But the natural world doesn't know those things, and I think I've said this to you guys, a photon doesn't know what it's being used for. A photon could be used for spectroscopy, which could tell you what elements are in the core of the sun, or a photon can be used to reflect off a painting and give you the color red. Now, in a way, we're each choosing in which way we want this photon to behave, but the photon itself is just a nature. And I think if you can use the definitions that we create around us when they're useful and forget about them when they're not, then it's really handy. So I kind of feel like I try to forget about them as much as possible until I need them, which is kind of when you start to present your work in particular domains, or if you are writing, then it's great. But other than that, I try to leave it alone.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Aoife. Keep my fingers crossed for tonight. Performance starts at...
It starts at 8 o'clock. People are getting the bus. I think they're sort of meeting in the info area or in the car park around 7:15. I think we're already booked out, but if there's any dropouts, people might be worth going to check. I know I've had one cancellation today. Yeah, I think we're ready.
I'm going to run back in a minute and find out.
Aoife, thank you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you. Okay, we move now onward to Sarah Petkus residency, and Claudia, Mignone, or Karen will be so kind to give their record of her visit or flyby or rendezvous at ESA.
Okay. This was probably more in the nature of a flyby, I think, in the sense that Sarah came to us for just 3 weeks in June. And so in that 3 weeks, she had to both figure out what there was at ESTEC that would fit with what she wanted to do. And robotics are not a core part of the space science program, so that was also something new for us. But Sarah is very adaptable, and she can definitely make a lot out of a little. She got an office too, but it wasn't quite as colourful as Sarah's, or as Aoife's. What we did first was, and we had also done this with Aoife, was to introduce her to people in the space science department during a coffee morning. So it's kind of an informal get-together. There are often people who are speaking after the coffee, and so that was a nice opportunity for a gentle introduction to people and to show what this strange noodle was. We also then made visits to areas at ESTEC which are more directly related to robotics. So there we have a haptics lab where we investigate human-robot interfaces. There's also a planetary orbital lab, but I think Sarah and Noodle's favourite place was the Mars Yard. I'm sure Sarah will have something to say about that later. Because there wasn't so much directly related to Sarah's work, we also looked further afield. We went to the Technical University in Delft to meet students and staff there who work on swarms of small little robots. And we met a philosopher. We met a student of philosophy also in Delft and had a very interesting discussion there about the ethics of robots and the ethics of what goes on in space and about creativity. Perhaps this is something that Sarah might like to talk about herself. This was Noodle's play date.
Awesome. Yes, this was a great day. So I was lucky enough and fortunate enough to meet all the roboticists that were working on this particular day in the Planetary Robotics Lab. And I had Noodle with me, and they were running simulations with one of their test rovers for the ExoMars mission. And the robot in the picture is called Exoterre. I think I should probably maybe talk a little bit more about this guy first, or at least introduce him. I think someone already mentioned that this guy's name is Noodle Feet, right? When I applied for this residency, I stated, space exploration is always observational. We're collecting data for ourselves in the places that we can't go ourselves as humans. And I asked, well, what if we do something different? What if we not do that? What other things could we do? What other ways could we do it? And the robot that I'm currently developing is based on my own content, based on my drawings and illustrations. So he's a character of mine, and he is a caricature of a spacefaring probe who wants to grow up one day to go see another world. So my responsibility as his parent and as an engineer is to allow him to do that. It's up to me to facilitate and everything that he would need to experience what he wants to once he gets to some other planet. So I focus in developing behavioral mechanisms and ways that he can interface with his environment and ways that he chooses. And he's an ongoing project. He's constantly growing as I'm learning. And the end goal is that he can interface with his environment in personally expressive ways and ultimately decide what he likes from what he doesn't like. And that is so he develops his own taste. And yes, I have drawings and illustrations and animations actually on display here at the festival of him wandering around and exploring Martian terrain. So he actually got to do this for himself and leave his own footprints on Martian or simulated Martian soil, along with treads from the ExoTerra rover, which was kind of special. But that I answered the question about the.
Just keep the microphone, Sarah.
Okay.
Keep the microphone. I mean, sometimes conversations are difficult, right?
Yes.
You don't know a person, it may be awkward, you don't know. Sometimes it can help to bring a third person into that situation, right?
Yes. So he was.
A child would break the ice, or an animal might break the ice, or a robot might break the ice. Is this assumption correct, that the presence of your robot
Most certainly
influenced the dynamics of what was going on?
Yes,
when you went there?
Everyone who I met with at STech, I would more or less walk into either their office or wherever we were chatting, and I would drop him on the table along with, I had appendages that I was working on that were replacements for these feet that are on him right now, and they did a bunch of wacky things, strange behaviors, and I would just sort of throw them out there at the person and go, well, this is Noodle. He, licks and drools and tastes things and swallows small objects off the ground. What do you think of that? And that just sort of took people, they're taken back and they had to think about it and kind of digest the whole concept, as absurd as it is, as witty and human and playful. And they would start talking about themselves ultimately, like in the end, and the conversations would become very personal and very, based on the nuance of personal experience in regard to what they do at the facility. And I was able to sort of trace bits of their humanity and kind of investigate where they overlapped with my work. And those are the things that I think are special.
Were you able to besides having experiences like that one where we see the pictures, for instance, a special day, of course, in the overall concept or the vision of the project, to draw from the encounter specific insight, things that kind of brought your development further?
I think from
impulse.
For this particular experience, what this led to is actual technical discussions with the engineers who were there. So conceptually, maybe not so much, but it did unlock some of the roboticists who were there, and I got to discuss technical matters, like how he functions as a machine, as a mechanism, and that's a huge portion of what I do, is how to actually get the thing I'm creating to perform the way I want it to, and it's a battle. So I did get feedback from people who have a lot more experience than I do, making that happen, and in a lot more challenging environments than I have to. So what I learned on this particular day was valuable in that regard, the more technical. Yes.
So the next stop is Mars, or?
Yes. If when he grows up and he can think for himself and he still wants to go to Mars and not do anything else, then Mommy will be very proud of him.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool. Sarah, thank you for the moment. Yeah.
Thank you.
So if I may add one thing, so you had this question for Sarah about the function of Noodle as being
catalyst.
Yes, a catalyzer for discussion and talking about the things that we don't normally do. And I think that in general, if we can then generalize this to the whole role of the artist in a scientific institution, because that's what we are discussing about today. And that was exactly our experience, as I showed with the pictures earlier of Aoife and her brainstormings, and Sarah, even just with noodle in the cafeteria. It would be a trigger for a gathering of people who have similar professional interests, but often, because also within a sphere of expertise, you tend to have specializations. Maybe you never talk about what you really have in common. So it was very important in both cases to have that aspect, to have scientists and engineers that would start talking about and would also interact and discover other things that are happening within ESTEC, which is 2,500 to over 2,500 people. So that role of the catalyst was not only Noodle, but in general, both artists, they feel that pretty well.
I think you have prepared, you ran a survey about the two residencies.
Yes, we had.
We're eager to see and hear what came of it.
Very preliminary results about trying to evaluate this experience, which was the first time, at least in our in the group at ESTEC that works in science, of having artists for such a long period of time. So this is just a distribution of the sample of people who replied. So we contacted all the scientists on staff and the engineers from the robotic labs. A fraction of them replied. Probably way more have interacted with them. Also some who haven't interacted with them replied. So we have a little but hopefully fairly representative sample of people who met both, people who only met Aoife or Sarah. And these are the type of interactions that they had. So some people only interacted with either of them on informal occasions, which could be over coffee breaks, over lunch, over other informal social activities, which was already an occasion to discuss the overlap of art and science. And then there were people who had a formal meeting, either with Sarah or with Aoife, which is a dedicated time in their schedule, an hour or more, talking about what they do professionally. And then Aoife organized the brainstorming and the workshop or live intervention. And then Sarah had her, let's call it hands-on meeting, so really visiting the robotics labs and interacting there. So it was a little bit spread around. There were a lot of informal people who had informal encounter, but also all the other activities. And this was also, we asked a generic question just as a, to weigh a little bit whether these people have also in parallel to their professional life also have a personal interest in art. And most of the people who replied to the survey do. They either regularly or occasionally attend art events, have had courses or so. Only 2 or 3 don't have a special interest in art, but then didn't prevent them from interacting with the artists and actually being fascinated by the interaction. And then when we asked them what their impression was of the interaction they had with either artist, this is a little summary of their replies. And we were really lucky because they all found these projects extremely, extremely interesting and motivating and fascinating, amazing. So there were a lot of positive responses. And yeah, what I mean by lucky is that we had 2 extremely competent artists who were very engaging and put a lot of effort in engaging and taking engagement even to the next step. So the response was very positive. I just want to read one of the longer, more extended comment. It was a motivating experience, providing a completely different perspective of how ESA and our work is perceived, and also how our activities can be portrayed or communicated. I was also unaware of such activities, and being made aware is good. I hope they benefited from the exchanges, because I did. I felt I gained insight into better ways of presenting what we do, what the missions are. So there was definitely a feeling of positive, beneficial exchange, not only on the personal level, so people were made aware of something that exists that they didn't know, but something that can have an influence on their professional activities, because also various people highlighted how the both disciplines are creative, and science can gain in creativity by the new perspective brought by artists. We also asked to the people who had interacted with them what type of encounter they think they had, and what they think the role of a scientist is in art science exchange. And certainly the majority said that, of course, they are looking forward to a two-way multidisciplinary exchange, which was, of course, what we were expecting. And others are spread between whether it's more about giving, more about receiving, and whether it's about, there were some extra comments on whether we could fly art that is associated to our mission. So something, there were several comments on the public outreach and engagement aspect, which of course it's different beast, but it's also very important for ESA, being a publicly funded agency, to engage with the public and talk about missions. And also the other aspect is the creativity, and how the presence of an artist can help the actual scientific practice and research. And then we asked another question, which is how can, if it was an encounter, perhaps a one-way encounter, how can this become more of a two-way exchange? And I think here there's, we already start, even with the small numbers, to see somewhat of a trend, because what people expressed is that there should be either the artist staying for a longer time, or the artist stay all the time, and an artist staying there all the time, or anyway having more time and resources on the scientist side to interact, engage, and experiment and work together with the artist. So the wish is there, but here we are also facing more structural boundaries that are created by how research is performed on a logistical level in this epoch. So. Finally, the last question was, would you be interested in the future to be involved in an art science residency as a scientist? And the answer was overwhelmingly yes. So about 3/4 said unconditionally yes, and there was a few yes but. And again, here in the but we have some elements that come back again, and it's the time, yes, but not as a research fellow, for example, because a lot of people who engage, especially with IFA, were research fellows who are postdoctoral researchers who are, of course, on temporary contract and have constantly to look for their future research opportunities, so it's a time-constrained position. And some other answer was, well, I will not be here in the future because the future is also uncertain. And so I think that to truly support, the wish is there, but to truly support these activities, we have to deal with how to handle time and perhaps also how to acknowledge the work of scientists who engage with artists. And I'm looking forward to tackle these issues in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Claudia. Thank you. Okay, we say goodbye and toi 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 to Aoife. Thank you for coming and joining us. Okay, are there, before I close this part of the session, any burning questions to the ladies still present here? Will they be around later, and we'll later have also discussion? I see raised hand, sorry, in the corner of my. Please, sir, microphone is coming to you.
Yeah, hello. I have a question for our ESA representatives here. I would like to know if there is any institutional memory in the European Space Agency, and specifically in ESTEC, on all the efforts on the art science and art and technology collaborations that have been going on different levels since the late 90s, and if there is a folder somewhere in ESTEC that actually has art science on it. Because it looks like Groundhog Day to some of us who have seen this spectacle before.
Yeah, I think what's true to say is that there have been many initiatives in the past, but primarily driven by personal interest. You know, so somebody who's very passionate about seeing this happen, spent time and effort, you know, got people involved. But then it would peter out. I'm aware of a number of projects that have taken place in the past, and I think one lesson that is very clear from that is that you need institutional buy-in and support and a long-term perspective for how you're going to sustain projects like this. And either you do it by yourself or you do it in partnerships. So in this case, we were doing it in partnership with Ars Electronica.
Yeah, but ESA has spent probably around 150,000 euros over the past 20 years on producing documentation on these projects. I just want, my direct question is your team aware of those documents that people spend hundreds of hours to produce and ESA paid for them?
Yeah, certainly the topical team documents from the human spaceflight area. I did some research on that before. Yeah.
So, thank you. We stand on the shoulders of giants and we make the best of it. I thank the ladies for coming and still staying with us, and would now switch. Sorry. I'm sorry, sir, I didn't see you. Yeah, microphone is coming. And then we'll switch for the next session.
I hope this doesn't sound a bit flippant, but I have a question about gender politics. For Sarah, you refer to the robot as he. Is that deliberate, or did you think about it?
Yes, to answer your question, I don't know, I don't think machines or robots have gender, because they don't. But it's more polite to call something that I think of as my child he or she versus it. So I don't know, it just seems sort of rude for my baby, but yeah.
Okay. Please allow me to switch to the next session. Thank you for the moment. Thank you, Sarah, Claudia, Karen. Thank you.
good?
Okay. Habe ich wieder Ton? So, wir gehen in die nächste Runde. Next round starts, and I welcome Yen Chang from Taiwan on stage. Please, Yen, take a seat. Sabrina Haase, and already with me on stage, Bianka Hofmann. The two ladies from the Fraunhofer Institute for Medical Image Computing, MEVIS. They were hosting a residency of Yen as an artist very recently, and very recently also Yen presents her work here at Ars Electronica Festival. I may first ask Bianka Hofmann to give us her accord of the residency.
Thank you. Hello, and thank you for having me here. So I realize projects in science communication to involve people early in scientific topics and future technology, thus making the implications for society understandable. I work at Fraunhofer MEVIS as head of corporate communication. In the last couple years, I expand my activities where science meets the arts, involving the next generation and exploring flexible forms of approaches in science communication. With me is Sabrina Haase, a mathematician, and she's a coordinator of research and industry projects at Fraunhofer MEVIS. For many years, she has been leading the educational opportunities the Institute provides for young researchers. For example, the STEAM imaging project. And also Yen Chang, a Taiwanese media artist who lives and studies here in Linz. She has been working in interdisciplinary art and performances based on sound installations. And Yen was the artist in residence at Fraunhofer MEVIS. And her performance, Whose Scalpel, can be seen on Monday afternoon here in the Post City. So at Fraunhofer MEVIS, we develop real-world software solution for computer-aided medicine, bridging between medical imaging, image-guided therapies, and healthcare informatics. The goals of our work are to detect diseases earlier and more reliable, and customize treatments to each patient and make therapeutic success measurable. In our science communication, we want to remove barriers that prevent people from interacting with difficult health topics. We are focusing on the clinical impact of new technologies and their underlying math, physics, and computer science. We have developed several communication formats that express the value of our R&D to the public and encourage people to engage with medical technology topics in depth. A strong focus is the engagement on the coming generation. I am convinced that we need to deeply involve not only the public, but foremost young people, and let them actively discuss science and the development of new technology. Our SciComm projects are expressions of responsible research and software development in healthcare. Our research is affected in many ways by the fact that the developments in medical technology are changing our everyday lives in increasingly shorter innovation cycles. The rise of digitalization, big data, and artificial intelligence demands an immediate discussion of the implication for the society that needs to be widely understood. With Sabrina Haase, I designed a dialogue-oriented SciComm project which involves an artist, scientist, pupils connecting computer-assisted medicine with STEM education, sound art, and also ethical topics. As an institute working in the field of medical tech, we are used to working across disciplines. But with STEAM imaging, this time we were leaving the scientific disciplines behind and integrating an artistic approach. This challenged the participant on a personal level. So why were we doing this? Why is a software-oriented R&D institution cooperating with the arts and the next generation? What is the promise in it? And is it resolved? What did we want to reach by expanding a STEM workshop to a STEAM workshop and integrating the arts? With our STEM workshops, we usually wanted to raise awareness of how computerization supports and influences healthcare and the role of STEM in life sciences. With the STEAM imaging project, we now want to stimulate critical dialogue about new tech in society. We hope to reach further groups of pupils. Even those who want to study biology, for example, will need to learn math and statistics, and prospective artists have many new tools at their disposal that require basic computer science abilities. We want to show the value of current science and tech for art, and we want to support an artist to explore new fields. We want to interact with the coming generation, to inspire the participating scientists to gain clarity and composure concerning their research. Being involved in science communication fosters the discussion among researchers about different views based on the spectrum of their expertise. So we enhanced a STEM workshop to a STEAM workshop alongside Yensu Chang, within her residency, STEAM Imaging, which took place at the Fraunhofer MEVIS Institute in Bremen, Germany, and here at Ars Electronica Futurelab in Linz. In STEAM Imaging, we brought scientists, artists, pupils together in a context of learning STEM topics, using new tech, and practicing art. The roles of giver and taker were changing dynamically. In the first phase of the residency, Yen worked closely for 2 weeks with researchers at the institute. In the second phase, Yen went for several weeks to Ars Electronica Futurelab to create her performance, Whose Scalpel? This is a fusion of an interactive 3D model of her heart, movies based on real medical images, her images, and sound. During this time, our colleague Alex supported her on a remotely basis from Bremen to Linz. So during Yen's 2 weeks at the Institute, we worked with the participatory platform Confluence to discuss, exchange thoughts and material, and also book different modules in a calendar, which was open to all participants. This transparent working style is part of Fraunhofer MEVIS culture. Experts from 5 fields, beside Yen as an artist, took part. Sabrina, a mathematician and experienced workshop leader, I, the project designer and mentor of Yen, a sound designer, scientist from the MRI physics group, and Alexander Köhn, a software expert. Yen explored selected scientific topics and technologies in medical image processing. In the beginning, all participants gave a short pitch why they joined the project. An essential part for Yen was dedicated to learning MEVIS Lab. This is the software platform with which we process medical images and develop assistant tools for clinicians. With a reduced version, the pupils worked in their workshop. Additionally, Yen and experts held one-to-one conversations on topics such as artificial intelligence. Also, during fast-forward sessions, colleagues gave 3 to 5 minutes presentations of their work as an overview and a teaser for Yen to intensify communication. Furthermore, we invited interested co-workers to hold a session on ethical issues with Yen as an open discussion. The aim was to name and discuss questions that concern our research, and it was a great success. So as a result, we will continue to address these issues on an ongoing basis. Yen gave a plenary talk for the whole institute, and she shared her approach to her current artwork and presented a brief sketch of the artistic outcome within her residency. The team prepared the 2-day workshop with Yen for the pupils, and also Yen twice acquired medical data at the MRI scanner from her own body. So I now would like to hand over to Sabrina, who will give you some insights into the pupils' STEAM workshop. So we need someone, or is this on?
Okay, thank you. So I would like to talk about the two pupils workshop which we had. So one was in Bremen in March. So we had 16 girls, 7 boys from the 7th to 9th grade. And we had another one here at Ars Electronica in Linz in June with 6 girls, 13 boys in the one class from the 8th grade. So we worked with the two technological parts, which was MEVIS Lab on the one hand, so the software which we are using to build our software for the clinicians, and also pure data, which Yen uses for her sound installations. Some more scientists than me were involved, and also Yen. So now I'd like to show you some impressions about our workshop. So during our workshop here in Linz, we had a live demonstration of our MRI in Bremen. So the Bremen pupils, they had the chance to visit it in Bremen, of course. But we also want to show the Linz pupils how this really big machine works. So thus we invited our colleagues to share their knowledge with us here in Linz. And this was a really great success. The pupils were also able to scan something, to scan fruits on the other end. And yeah, it was nice to see. And they could ask questions, of course. In the Bremen workshop, we had 2 workshops. And the one was that the pupils should build models of their hands. So we used plaster to create models of their hands. And then we took those plaster models to put them into MRI, into the MRI machine, which you saw on the previous slide. And then we used this real MRI data, not from the body, but from the models of the body, to use it in an artistic fashion. And this is what you see on this image. So these are 3 hands lying above each other. Again, an image from the Linz workshop, where we colored a medical image which shows the abdomen, so the lungs and the heart, where the pupils were asked to enhance it with sound. So this was like the combination in both workshops, so in Bremen and in Linz, to use the medical image data, perform videos with it, so colored, for example, and then enhance it with sound. In Bremen, they also used sound from the MRI machine. And this is another example from the pupils in Bremen, where they scanned their hand like this. So the plaster model showed this hand form, and then they encountered that this, from the MRI, looks like a rose. So who could ever imagine that this could be a hand? Yeah, this rose over here. Okay, and now I'd like to hand back over to Bianka, who tells us something about the lessons learned.
Yeah, lessons learned and our plans for the future. So STEAM imaging was an experiment of dialogue-oriented science communication. We realized space for possibilities where what comes next was not predefined. The players and the content were selected, but no one knew what the results would look like. In the end, what mattered was the collective work and the openness to what could emerge. Throughout the process, we realized that it is challenging to be creative in the office environment beyond working at a computer. It was not easy to open up and engage in the process within the daily goal-oriented routine of applied science to take a deeper look around and also what happened in us. So we would have enjoyed having more time to physically share space, to allow playing, fogginess, and encounters within the cross-disciplinary topics. In winter, we will discuss the future of this format of science communication at the Institute. So scientists can contribute to developing utopias, neither dystopias nor promises of technological salvation. Today, the shift in science and tech toward practical applications became sharpened through big data and AI from the fundamental understanding of active basic principles of nature to approximations and predictions based on huge amounts of data and statistics, this influences the scope of the ideas of our future. How do we want to discuss new possibilities in science and tech and describe their development? We need to expand our reception of reality in our research teams, not only regarding expertise like art, ethics, philosophy, but also the spectrum of participants to include women and people of color. We want to go on to create projects in which scientists contextualize their expertise in a broader sense and become inspired to relate facts, empirical data, and science to humanities, social realities, and values. Scientific organization could host cross-disciplinary intergenerational platforms to deal with the impact of new tech at an early stage. And STEAM imaging was our latest exploration and approach in accomplishing this. So I thank you all for your attention, and we would like to show now a short movie of Jens' artwork, and afterwards we are open to your thoughts and questions.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Bianka Hofmann. As announced, we will look at a video.
Yeah, maybe I can give a short note.
Give us an impression.
We also have an evaluation of the pupils' workshops of Bremen and Linz. So who else is interested, please contact us, and yeah, we will send it to you. Yeah, I forgot it too, but yeah. Please contact us to get this evaluation report.
Please go on talking. We tackle slight technical problems.
This is not Jens' artwork.
Mamma mia. Jetzt sind wir da. Wunderbar. Danke. Okay, sorry for the wait. We have this video here that gives you a short impression of Ian's peaceful scalpel. As you see, there's one more chance to view this live in full expand. I'll play the video once more without sound now to give Yen the chance to briefly explain to us what the piece is about and what you're doing.
Okay, whose scalpel is it's a sound performance combined with a visual and 3D print installation, and realized with an application framework for medical image process. And I try to combine art and science this area and based on those knowledge to develop this project. And it's an imagination of the future surgery. And the concept is developed from 3 different areas. The application of sound in medical science, coronary artery bypass surgery, and machine learning. Yeah.
How did you develop this concept, Yen? Did you come with a prepared idea? Did you develop it on site, get input from Fraunhofer MEVIS? What did you develop at Futurelab? This was a long process?
Yes.
Yeah.
In the beginning, when I get the proposal, I already need to develop some idea what I want to do of my artistic outcome. And then I check the information from Fraunhofer MEVIS. And there's a video is guidance prototype for navigating liver surgery. So this surgery that if I think maybe Sabrina or Bianca can bring out more detail about it, but this surgery is related about the audio that when the tool goes away and the sound will notice the surgeons, the direction goes to a different. And I find out that these 3 similar my practice about sound. So in the beginning, I already decided I want to make a sound art performance, but approach by a surgery way. And then I am doing the residency in the Fraunhofer MEVIS, and I meet so many experts. And they also noticed that in the surgery, there's so many detail I can also taking care, and it also the important character is not just surgery in the room, but also anesthetics. They are also take a very important role. So I also put this character in the machine. That I bring 3 characters that on the stage. One is surgeon, the other one is machine, and then the patient. But I put much more responsibility on the machine. And then let's talk about the residency in the future.
Yeah, the residency. I mean, coming to a residency often means going outside of your comfort zone, maybe for both sides.
Yeah.
How did you manage to enter the conversation with the scientists and specialists at Fraunhofer MEVIS?
So about the with residency with Fraunhofer part, I'm much more that they provide some information, and I also give the idea, and then after discussion that we modify again and again, because that I need to get to know how the technical part, like how much Fraunhofer they can reach and how many possibilities in the science area that I need to get to know, and then find my position and possible way to do it in the art way. And in the Futurelab, it's much more close my original study. Mm-hmm. But 3D printing is still pretty new for me. That I mean, this technology I already knew that, but to really close to work on it and find the correct material for the heart model is really professional things. And the Futurelab gave me many suggestions, and we discuss again and again that that's pretty. It takes some months already
to do. Yeah. And you really put your own heart into it.
Yes,
in
exactly.
many meanings of the word. Yeah. Wonderful. We've taken a long way from the beginnings with the CERN, the smallest particles our world consists of, to the farthest galaxies in space, and in a long curve to the human body and questions of health or disease, matters of life and death, ultimately. So, are there any burning questions towards the ladies from Fraunhofer MEVIS or Yen? I see a raised hand. The microphone will be coming to you shortly.
Okay, so after I noticed that, like, in the structure of this residency, you were doing initially like artistic research in residence at the institution, and then following that, you and the scientists you collaborated with provided a workshop to other people. Okay, and as far as I'm aware, like, that's not normally how people do residencies, and I think it's really interesting. And I was wondering, do you think that because you then presented a piece or these days of workshop as a united team, that somehow changed the relationship in your residency from being you as an artist approaching an institution and then being there permanently to you all being part of a team collaboratively together at the end? To both of you, all three of you.
Maybe Sabrina.
So you mean something changed, like, from the person as an artist, and then so that you become a team rather than you are a new member of, or like a semi-permanent member of that team? Because my background is about media arts, and I really interesting to get to know any new language or technology. So basically, it just because I get more support from technical part and more information about scientist part. And yes, it's something changed, but it's because more supporting from the knowledge. That's from my part.
Thank you.
And I was respect from the Fraunhofer MEVIS that my creation is their respect of it. Yeah.
Okay, so my feeling was that we had a team feeling right from the beginning. So Yen was integrated, and she could come over to everybody's office and ask questions. So I don't know if you have another feeling, but for me, from my perspective, it was like a team from the first day on. So we had lunch together, for example, every day. Yeah, and also the workshops then were held as a team, and yeah.
Also what's interesting is that Yen mentioned in an interview that the roles of giver and taker became fluent through the pupils' workshop, and I think in this direction your question, okay.
This is, yeah, basically the best how it could be. We will have a very short break of like 5 minutes now because we're running behind schedule, or we continue immediately. Okay, good. We press on. I thank the ladies from Fraunhofer MEVIS and Yen Su-Chang for joining. And we immediately switch, thank you for joining us, to the next session, which is about the cultural and curatorial aspects of the entire endeavor. I cordially ask Ashlyn Murray and Antoine Conjard and Marie Perrier to join me on stage. Yeah, wonderful. Okay. Okay, I have more microphones here. Wonderful. Okay. One of the basic elements of this digital art and science network was to be able to cover the entire production chain of an artwork. From the very inception, the inspiration, the idea, the gems of the idea, to the conceptualizing, to the research, to the realization and also engineering of a piece, and to the presentation and critical reflection. In order to be able to do this fully and actually, as previously mentioned, a number of cultural partners were drawn into that network, who brought themselves a long-standing expertise in work with art and science, in work with informing, I even dare say educating audiences. Aislinn, Science Gallery at Trinity College, Dublin, your institution. One of the special aspects of that institution is about communication and education.
Science Gallery is a small, young, it's our 10th birthday in February, space that brings together art and science. We have 4 exhibitions a year. We have no permanent collection, so it's all temporary, all done through an open call process. And our target age group are 15 to 25-year-olds. So why 15 to 25-year-olds? Because it's at that age that you see attendance to cultural events start to drop off. It's also when you see the interest in both arts and in science start to drop off. So, because before that, people we brought through school tours or by their parents, and then you see as people get into their early 30s, late 30s, they start to bring their own children again. So in targeting 15 to 25-year-olds, I suppose it's both the science communication aspect and then also public outreach programs working with within the university and then also with secondary schools.
Your part, the experience of your part in that network, how was that? You presented certain pieces, you had the dialogue with the artists involved.
Yeah, so we had
When did you step into that process?
So I suppose Science Gallery would have 4 ways that we would kind of look at engaging with artists and scientists and that collaboration. So the first would be engaging experiences, and that would be the instrumentalization of art by science. So say taking Field Test, which was an exhibition that we did about the future of farming, taking that as an example, a good example of an engaging experience would be Loki Food Lab, which was a food cart where visitors could go in and taste bioregional food futures. Then the second type would be new tools, which would be the instrumentalization of science by art. So again, in Field Test, then we had a piece by Philip Ross called Mycotexture, which was using living fungus to create these bricks. And then the third type would be precautionary design. So I suppose that would encompass elements of speculative design, critical design, and a piece that we had was by Austin Stewart called Chicken VR. So I suppose looking at the visitor would get to try on the VR headset and be in the position of the chicken and roll around on this ball. It was a bit ridiculous. But I suppose the conversation that was opening up there is how do you create a compelling experience for the visitor when they're bashed over the head with topics all the time? Art and science has the ability to open up difficult conversations, and through some of those speculative pieces or these kind of fictional futures, you're able to have conversations now that may enable you to address future issues. So with the chicken VR, if you're looking at issues around battery farming, if we don't change something, is this the future we're looking at where you have still battery farming, but chickens who wear VR headsets and think that they're organic? Is that still an organic free-range chicken, free-range eggs, if the chicken itself thinks that it's free-range because it's wearing a VR headset? And then the fourth type that we would look at is the kind of sweet spot, which is the co-creation, where it's an equal exploration of artists and scientists together to an endpoint. And that's they're more rare and can bring with them their own difficulties. So say in field test again, a good example was Oren Katz and Robert Foster's piece, Stirfly Nutrient Bug, which was a domestic bioreactor that used fruit fly cells to create in vitro meat. The thing with that piece was that we spent so long preparing it, and within 2 weeks of the exhibition opening, it got infected and actually exploded all over our research coordinator. So we had to then embrace the conversation around that and be, okay, if this is a future that we're looking at, and this is after happening, how close is that future really? And even that piece was presented alongside Mark Post's Labburger. So again, you have this interesting conversation then happening between these pieces. And then within those 4 types, just to recap, the engaging experiences, new tools, precautionary design, and co-creation, you end up having an interesting conversation happening with the juxtaposition of those different types, like even showing commercial products alongside speculative products within the exhibition. So those would be 4 of our approaches to working with art and science. But I suppose tying us back into our question, does art and science need curators? I think in Science Gallery we would feel no. You don't need curators. So artists and scientists individually don't need curators, but even together they don't need curators. I suppose they need a creative platform, a place for a meeting of minds, a place for exploration. There are many differences between art and science, but they're not given enough credit for having a lot of similarities. They're both about pursuit of truth. They're both about investigation, wonder, curiosity. So trying to pull those out and create a space that has a strong cafe culture as well, that can be a meeting point where people have conversations. And you look here at Ars Electronica, there are mind-blowing works here, like incredible things. But what's really exciting is like the people that are having coffee. In like 5 years' time, are they going to have something, people who've never met before? So facilitating that meeting of minds, I think, would be the role of the curator for art and science for me.
We'll come back to the point once more later. Antoine Conjard, l'Atelier Art Sciences Grenoble. Please tell us a little about yourself and your institution.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to invite me to speak about what we are doing in Grenoble, in the Alps. I'm the director of a theater, a national scene for contemporary live show. Hexagon is the first national scene entirely dedicated to arts and sciences relationships. My mission is to provide the territory with contemporary culture. In particular, I have to imagine the links between new knowledge, breakthrough technologies, and mindset of the inhabitants. So the research between artists and scientists is not cut from the rest of the world. Even if they both need confined conditions, the process of research is always considered in the prospect of sharing it with people of the territory, with students, entrepreneurs, artistic networks, scientific network, and companies network, but also with public administration, school, social actors, associations, all what are citizen forces of the territory. All the 20 persons working in Hexagon are working for those links. Either if I feel the difficulty to put artists everywhere in the city life, I imagine that artists should be everywhere in the city. And I imagine that the relationship between artists and scientists must be everywhere. I don't think they have the solution for all the challenges we are facing, but surely when people are in front of artwork, that brings them in a detour, which is the best way to enlightening reality. Since the year 2002, we have started building the links between artists, scientists, and the almost 700 of inhabitants of Grenoble metropolis. I must also mention that there are 22,000 of researchers in Grenoble. That's quite huge. We first started by working with CEA, which is the most important research center in France. It is quite the equivalent of Fraunhofer in Germany. It is the first time that a theater signed such contract with such a big research center in France. The wonderful thing that happened was that CEA dedicated time of researchers for our collaboration, so that when artists and scientists want to conduct research together, they all are getting paid for it. That's important. That's basis. Our close partnership with CEA is called Atelier Science. That cooperative agreement is much more dedicated to new technology, but we also work on philosophical questions. By instance, we are preparing with 7 artists and several scientists an exhibition on artificial intelligence and attention for next summer in Paris. Maybe it is the first good reason why the connection between artists and scientists needs a curator. Creating and organizing the conditions of common research, organizing production and diffusion, making links with networks and territory forces. But before starting the research, there are several steps that we have to go through. First, the idea of a research project comes from all parts, artists, scientists, and laboratory, hexagon, and also from companies. But we always need to find the right artist with the right scientist, and we spend a long time in visits and exchanges, making hypotheses, changing the first ideas, taking completely new direction, assessing and finding the resources required by the emerging project. During all that process, we have to support the pair in matching dream with reality. During all that process, but also during the research process itself, we work on the technical matters and all the enabling conditions. But in that environment of new knowledge and new technologies, opening new fields, our relationship to time and space, developing huge ethical interrogation, we all need to speak a lot. Finding conceptual resources by philosophers, political and humanities researchers, and by all the human sciences. That's why I've developed a link with the University Grenoble Alpes, and why we are developing another atelier with the support of the Ministry of Culture and CNRS, the other French research organization. We are building a more culturally centered approach with researchers in literature, in living art, but even in this case, we still have to deal with technological issues. So it's only by building a great environment for both artists and scientists that we can help them develop their point of view, go beyond conventional mindset, and create a new path for reflection, action, and production. After, they are doing their artwork and their scientific researches on their own. For now.
Thank you, Antoine. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Let's look a little closer at the format of the residency that has been our topic this afternoon, and the core format used in that network we were discussing here. When you were speaking about the need, less for curators, but for a platform, how do you see that in relation? The conventional model of an artist going to a science institution, in the most of the cases in that direction and not vice versa. The artists rarely leave their institution and go to an individual artist's space, unless they have already established a relationship and a collaboration that leads to that. But it's usually not the way it starts, right? can the residency be something that triggers and feeds that process into the platform, or can it be the other way around, that the platform is the place where both sides meet, so to say, but what does the platform then require to really be able to facilitate that?
I think it can be both. I think that the residencies are a really good starting point. And also that is that co-creation, that's an organic process. But I think it's about, like, the platform is certainly creating the space, creating a residency, creating the opportunity for these people to meet, but facilitating that conversation because, okay, so say in Science Gallery we have an open call process. Artists are far more familiar with submitting through an open call process than scientists and researchers are. So quite often we would have to reach out to them and do a little bit more work there. But a lot of the time they are speaking the same language, but just differently. Ultimately it comes down to the fact they are pursuing the same thing, but you're trying to facilitate that conversation in a language that they both understand. So kind of like that, you know, that Sufi story of all the blind men who are all touching different parts of an elephant, and they're all talking about which part of the elephant, describing which part of the elephant they're talking, and they think that they're all speaking about something different. We're all talking about the same thing. We're all pursuing the same thing. So it depends on what the collaboration is, like what the scientific discipline is and what the artist's discipline is, how you would facilitate that. It's so subjective each time, but I think if you are creating space for those dialogues to happen, and certainly the residency really helps cement that in having an organic process where people get to spend time together, and in a way parts of a residency aren't about an end point, and not having the pressure of a product to deliver at the end can really help facilitate those organic collaborations.
That's an important point that came up also in the work of this European network. The people from CERN put it, I think, best to the point when they said that from the very beginning they said they would not expect a result in the form of a finished art piece or whatever, performance or whatever, yeah. And they went even further and said, of course, with a twinkle in the eye, if you don't expect a result, the result will be better. Well, so much about open-ended processes. Antoine, what do you think the role, the format residency, yeah, artist coming as a resident to a science research institution, how important is that format also in relation to your work?
It's all time different. We invent what's going to happen with the artist and with the scientist, and it is the object of the project of Together that will make the method. The method is not done at the beginning. It will come. So it's difficult to speak about that to the politician or to the European Commission, because they always want to have a surely process, and our process is not defined. It will be defined, but it doesn't exist.
Yeah, of course. The factor of time, yeah, also comes up in this context. You know, we had this metaphor of flyby or rendezvous from this world of space travel and missions. Going beyond that, we learned that there seems to be a kind of average minimum time of a couple of weeks, yeah, before it gets really into a conversation and not just a sliding on the surface, so to say. And then there's not a maximum duration, but a certain point where I think Michael Dosa of CERN said that where the artists would want to become scientists, and then we have to stop. Of course, speaking seriously, there's realistic constraints in the time schedules of artists, and those of institutions as well, and there's financial constraints. You can't let this go on forever, even if the participants hoped for or wished for. But there's different strategies on repetitive encounters that allow for times to work on things, to digest things, to come back, to create larger feedback loops, so to say, as part of that co-creation, as you coined it. What did you find about the factor of time? How can you handle that? Because we're living in such an event-driven culture where you do one thing, present it, and then it's off. Yeah. But the reality of that is a long-term thing, isn't it?
I think coming back to the point of it being about conversation and about building those relationships that allows for collaboration to be quietly simmering in the background. But the fact that we open on an open call basis, our open calls are always 6 months out from the exhibition. So we are on incredibly tight timelines all the time, no permanent collection, all temporary. So comes in and then everything's torn out. So we've never had a residency program, but we hope that through the kind of events that we would do and the exhibitions, that you have these meeting of minds where something might come out of us. Now, I've lost my train of thought. Sorry.
No problem. But the factor of time, Antoine, let's ask Antoine. How do you deal with that? I mean, you have the scientists around in Grenoble. They're not just visiting; they're living and working there. And you work with artists. How do you handle the factor of time?
Tomorrow morning, I will welcome an artist working on the spirit of the Bible and what the imagination the Bible put in our mind. In our deep mind, and I will start a connection with a scientist which is working on imaginary, and I think I cannot know how long it's going to take. Maybe in 2 years we will be continuing to work together. We are not working every day together. That's I think we need times to change our mind, to make links, to write, to speak, to make something, to stop, to go on. So it's a respiration that we have to find together. There is one thing that's difficult, but sometimes it's give more activity. It's when we have a biennale or when we have a show and it's written on the program, so we know that we have to be good at that time. So there is an acceleration at that time. But it's not the only way we want to work between artists and scientists. And it's why we have Imagine Experimenta, the saloon, and it's why we show what we are doing with the public, the audience. But sometimes it's not finished, so they know that it's not finished.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good point just about it not being finished, because similarly in Science Gallery, when we put out the exhibitions, we don't see them as being finished products. They're constantly evolving. Like, so even that Oren Katz piece, where when it exploded, we added video documentation where we interviewed the artists and we interviewed our research coordinators so that we could capture the kind of new element of conversation around that piece. So, and then also, I suppose, looking at moving from being a content provider as a museum to being a creative platform where you are co-creating even with your visitors and with your audience and allowing them to engage and interact and contribute, whether that's through contributing to research or becoming a part of the critique and a part of that conversation, or actually getting hands-on. Like in every exhibition we would have an interactive area. We don't actually call them those because that's awful, but we rename them. But it's where people can kind of get more hands-on with some of the content, create some of the pieces, maybe curate some of the exhibition, so that you are really, in making the visitor more implicated in the work and in the exhibition, they become a participant, they become more of a part of it, and they become a critic as well.
Well, speaking of coming to an end, we will have to end this middle session now. Are there burning questions towards my guests of this round? I have to just take the 360-degree look. You want to say something? Okay, final word for Antoine.
I profit if there is no question.
Now there's a...
I was curious, what is your background? You're directing this Art and Science residency program, but your personal background, what is it? Yes.
Mm-hmm. I'm a carpenter.
Carpenter, like Jesus.
But I turned wrong.
So that's why you're doing the Bible project.
That's why I like technology, maybe. But I also made cultural studies. But I also work a lot on the terrain, and so. When you bring together that kind of way, that makes something to search, all time searching new things.
I'm also curious about your background.
My personal background? Yes. I was a theatre producer, so I would have worked in theatre, spoken word and dance, and then I started in Science Gallery, and I suppose that's kind of what I bring to the role in Science Gallery as well, because we would try and create exhibitions that are much more immersive and may have more in common with the transformative experience of going to a theatrical production. But also, I suppose, in not having a science background, we kind of say Science Gallery aren't experts in anything, we're just good at creating compelling experiences. And so we rely on third parties bringing in curators or researchers who are experts in their field. And so I would kind of bring the visitor perspective of making the pieces accessible.
Mm-hmm. She's working with Antoine.
I'm still curious for the background, because I think all of us bring something with our background.
I have a bit different background. I'm coming from a business school, but from the beginning of my professional career, I started working in music for a music ensemble on a European project, and then I decided to join the Art and Science platform.
I'm sorry, now I guess you get last word. I was just curious, sorry.
No, I just wanted to say that it is quite easy to find money for artistic project, but everyone wants to finance artists, but it's more difficult to find money to finance the structure of the creator. The creator alone cannot do nothing. He needs staff with him, with specific skills. And if the states, the region, the cities do not finance the structure that can welcome the artist, we cannot go on. That's, I think, the most important thing at the moment.
Mm. There's a question there. Please.
So this has been like really interesting to hear what we like maybe should or shouldn't have, but I'm wondering from the chair, like this conversation didn't start by discussing what to be a curator was. So in posing this question, like, do we need curators? Could you, as the chair, explain what you mean by being a curator in the first place?
Well, I wouldn't deliver a definition of the curator because there's so many different aspects to that task. But going back to the initial source of the word, it is about taking care. Yeah, taking care in a well-informed way. Yeah. And in the practical application of that, this can mean having a curator, meaning someone with expertise. In this case, we're speaking media arts. Yeah, with expertise in media arts, follow in the process. Yeah. Yeah, at the various stages of that process. But the question contains, of course, a second level, because the question now is, do we need curators knowledgeable and skillful in that special art of bringing art and science together? Yeah, and that's another level to it. Yeah, which we will maybe now discuss in round 3 with our guests. I thank Ashley Murray, Antoine, Conjard, and Marie Perrier for joining me. And we swiftly move on to round 3. Thank you. Thank you. I ask Victoria Vesna and Juri Kruppan, please join me. You're not blocking. The same focus. Yeah, that's it with me.
I go later, right? How do you want to do this?
No, we can start with you. I just need sound again and introduce you. No, it's fine. It's fine.
Don't you want to introduce?
I'll introduce you.
I don't want to dominate it with the picture.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, this is. Here's a microphone for you. Three. Okay, let me welcome my two guests. Victoria Vesna, both herself an artist as well as an academic teacher, professor at UCLA in California, director of the UCLA Art Sci Center. She'll be telling you something about a couple of minutes later. And Juri Kruppan from Slovenia, founder and director of Kapelica Gallery since 1995. 22 years, Juri. Yeah. We're really looking here back on a much longer development in the encounters of art and science, much further back than this residency program, which brings us to this stage today, is going. And there's, experiences from all this flowing into that. Both of you were involved with Ars Electronica in different capacities, and especially with this European Digital Art and Science Network on the juries and the selection processes that we haven't touched upon so far in this afternoon, because we were concentrating more on the result and process side, but they are a crucial thing. Yeah, you can have open processes, you can have curated processes. Here, in this case, Ars Electronica, based on the long experience with the pre-Ars Electronica, used the instrument of a jury sitting, yeah, with experts from art, media arts, from Futurelab, and from the receiving institutions, of course. Yeah, yeah, different setup than several other juries might have been. What do you think about the selection process? In an art jury, you look for artistic excellence, consistency, aspects along those lines. Not so exactly in an art and science jury when you select people to go to ESA, ESO, CERN, Fraunhofer. How's that, Victoria?
Well, I think I'll just go back to one of the comments earlier where I'm not sure who exactly said this. We have artists going into science labs, why don't we have scientists in the art labs? This is actually not possible because scientists have to do long-term and really intense research, and saying also that we do the same work is not really true. I mean, it's true that we all come and we go from the same source of inspiration. Yes, that's true for all of us. But then when it comes to methodologies and budgets, we come to a very different place. So what really becomes interesting is this edge where we are in a kind of a paradigm shift, because the methodologies and sciences have reached a limit, especially with the new sciences when you're looking at biotech, nanotech, and neuroscientists. And at this point, the scientists actually like engaging artists, and artists, of course, benefit from that because this is the world we live in. It's really driven by science. So in a way, it's contemporary art. It really is contemporary art. It's not recognized as such by traditional established 20th century institutions, but we're still in the first 17 years, so we're kind of in the 1917 era, right? So we look for artists who directly engage science and who are really committed to learning about it, number one, so not just throwing out quantum and different words and kind of playing with it to be like the new hip thing, but really engage it, to engage the dialogue, to not alienate scientists, but really bring them in and to bring questions in from an angle that's not something typical, and in particular, really challenge the reductionist way that scientists are generally trained, and approaches from a more comprehensive level, on a human level. So Yuri and I agree on this quite a bit, and it's actually pretty great sitting on the panel and seeing what everybody's doing and how the movement is growing. It's just actually phenomenal from, let's say, when you started 20 years ago with your gallery, and when I started with the center 10 years ago, or a little more.
Well, if I would try to answer your question, you know, how we selected the juries, art and science collaborations, it's very intuitive, because you never know how the artists and scientists will go along. No, because there has to be a certain attraction between the two, or the institution, and you have to have something in your hand. But when you are trying to institutionalize the collaboration, you're always, you know, somehow pending. You don't know really whether it will work or not, it will be worth or not. No? And we are more or less guessing who would fit in what way into a scientific institution when we are selecting artists visiting other institutions. However, the feeling that we got, at least in my case, you know, is we are having like 22 years of frustration behind us, you know, in trying to establish a fruitful collaboration with institutions, and it is not working. With us, it's not working. I don't know why. But then, why in a sudden we understood, you know, that we need to show our ambition. So first we set a lab. Said, okay, you don't want to open your doors, we'll make our own lab. No? I said, okay, do it. No? But then we start to do very interesting projects. So younger scientists, you know, start to raise the eyebrow and said, oh, interesting, let's go and see. And we have a lab now with the biotechnologists employed there. So we have our science, you know. And there is completely different tactical attitude when we are approaching an institution, you know, with our biotechnologist. Then we have a person who is speaking the language, you know, because there are so many prejudices, you know. I'm raising the telephone, okay, to set a meeting, and they expect that a curator with a painter will come, you know, and that we will make their corridors more beautiful, and so. Or our main scientific institution has a long-term director, like since ever, who is in spare time a painter, you know. And once I was invited there to make a talk, to do a talk on their annual gathering, which was named Art and Science New Renaissance. And when I saw Stellark, Marcelli, Elsner, all those guys in robotics, exoskeletons, you know, the robots we are doing, biotechnology, they were so upset, you know, they didn't invited me on the final panel. I was sitting in the first row, you know, it was a scandal. Since then, and this is almost 10 years, you know, I'm not allowed to enter the place. So, you know, this is about tactics and about feeling.
Not all doors are open, and the intuition you mentioned, Yuri, of course, as we know, feeds from experience, from things we know. Let's, like in the movies, now go a little bit back in history and follow the path shortly, how we arrived here. And I would like to ask Victoria Vesna to give us a brief account of the path that sort of led her here, and the very interesting story of the Art and Science Center she's been founding and leading. Yeah, a story of two cities, I may say, too.
So am I switching to this mic now? Yes. I don't see my slides.
The video desk is over there. Sound.
Ah, okay.
Here we go.
I see. Video, sound, cool. So, yeah, I want to quickly run through some of my strategies. So a lot of it is about bringing in different discussions and actually following one of my professor's comments. Roy Ascott was my professor, PhD, and one time we were in discussion and I was talking about the issues that Yuri was talking about, actually, and he said, you know, after the third drink, there's no disciplines. And I took this to heart, and it became actually my strategy. So I was chairing the Department of Design Media Arts for 7 years, and when I was ready to step down, they were offering me to go up the academic ladder, but I realized that it's actually replicating the same system, that it's actually not such a great system, and I wanted to envision something different. So I took the opportunity to figure out a way to create a center that actually is not focused on creating a building or a big program, but has a space in the arts and a space in the sciences and in the north and south. And this is usually how academia is separated and how we're actually taught to have these things separate. So 10 years later, it took 10 years. I mean, I did have similar situations where nobody came and all of that, but then I started figuring out, I just would put a poster up, free drinks and cookies, and people would come, and then they get drunk a little, and they start talking and making friends. And it kept me in good shape, because going from north to south and south to north, it's really far. So I see it as a kind of a diamond of looking at any issue or problem from many different perspectives. This is Elizabeth Taylor's diamond, by the way. Huge, huge. We have symposia every year, maybe 2, and then we bring together scientists and artists to talk. We're in the California Nanosystems Institute, so it actually helps to just bring the scientists who are there. And then speaking of your lab, we actually are figuring out ways to take DIY labs and bring them into established laboratories. And when we did this conference that was co-organized with the Center for Society and Genetics, a wonderful group at UCLA, we had an FBI agent join us too, which was lovely. And it was actually great because they were worried about biotech in particular, and this poster probably attracted them. But it was a great conversation, in fact, because I realized not only do we have to shift each other's minds, but there's a whole nother level of funding and relationships, etc. We have residencies. Kathy High I'm just holding one, but we have a lot of residents, and they usually come to us through their sabbaticals, or they happen to be around, so it's very informal. Workshops all the time, and a lot of them are proposed by faculty or students or somebody who happens to connect to us. This was a fun one. And then something happened about 7, 8 years into doing this repeatedly and also teaching a class. An undergraduate society student group self-organized, because there's not enough classes, there's not enough events, there's nothing really that keeps the thing going. So they started saying, well, we can't meet just once a month, and then they started doing their own thing, which really, really helped. So exhibitions, and then I would like to actually focus a little bit on education, just for a minute, because I think that's the key. To bring in more and more curriculum and into the media arts in particular, which is not as easy as you would think. I'm in the Department of Design Media Arts. I chaired it, I pretty much developed it, but my classes are outside of my department. So they're general education or honors classes. It's very hard to enter into the established curriculum. I think it's key. And I also think it's key to start early. So now we have done this for 10 years, where we bring in high school students who are interested to go into sciences. So we create this lab that's fantastic, where we have our graduate students teaching them, all faculty, high-end scientists come and talk to them. We take them out to the Getty, for instance, to show them, hey, at the Getty, there's not only all this art, but on the 12th floor, there's 11 scientists working full-time. We pull them into the clean room to show them how the stuff is done there. The last time we did it a month ago, we had 3/4 were girls who were really into science, which was really cool. And I asked them, why do you want to go to sciences? I can't really draw. I said, who told you that? How can anybody tell you that? Well, I don't think I'm really talented. Are you, what? And then I said, why are you going into the arts? Oh, because I can't really do math, or I have a really bad science teacher. So I really think it's so much about education early and then to continue, because the whole idea of separation of art and science is actually false. It's an absolutely false premise, and it's a new thing. It's new in the sense of a trajectory of education, starting with kind of the industrial age and the segregation of everything. This is a lab we enter. I have my students publish their own findings, because a lot of my students are from biology, and so I tell them that they should do their own thing. We take them out to, this time was the LA rivers, so we also want to show if you're doing nanotech, it's not in the lab necessarily, it's everywhere. So here we were exploring plastic molecules in water. And then I'll just give you, I don't know why this is doubling, but it's kind of cool, whatever. It's very strange, I have the small and the big one. These are the students who signed up for my classes. I mean, this is one class. And so I have them do blogs about a particular topic that I'm covering, and I tell them, you blog from your perspective. And so they're ending up reading from all these different perspectives from their peers about whatever I taught that was pretty small. So I'm very excited about that. I love learning from them as well. And then we have these Leonardo Art Science Evening Rendezvous, which whoever is in academia, I really recommend highly that you start having these evenings, because they're actually really help. They're social events. It's hosted by Leonardo. That's obviously, you would know the journal from MIT Press. And now it's in its, I think, also 10th year. Pierre Luigi started it in San Francisco, all over the world. So it's really fantastic. It's like a network. And then just one quick thing to end with. Again, a double picture. I ended, this year, I gave a short online course to Krista's Interface Cultures course. Fabrizio knows. I'm talking to you. And you know as well. And it was a fascinating experience, but you also know that in the first class when I came, so I gave them the online class, and then I came, I said, all right, so this is the University of Linz. You guys are all artists. How do we bring the scientists in? Where are the scientists? They're across the river. And I thought, that is so cool. So next day, we went across the river. And we met the people there at the Kepler University. And they just saw, this is a friend of one of the students who's in mechatronics, doing the same thing they're doing, right? So just kind of breaking that, oh, it's over there, and it's Kepler University, and it's so woo-hoo. It's actually, wait, we do even cooler stuff. Let's do this together. So I think going over the bridge is important. And last, I'll end with the Feminist Culture Change, which is the UCLA Artside Design Media Arts exhibition. These are the amazing, amazing group of people that put this together. Some of the faces have been covered by this stuff. And if you have time, come and check it out. It's in the Kunst University exhibition, and sign up to our mailing list. So there's like a quick overview that you asked for. Thank you. Okay.
We've lost the microphone for you, huh?
Oh, sorry.
Yuri, the story of Kapelica Gallery, how many bridges did you cross?
Many. It was in 2006 that I was curating a big event in a Museum of Modern Art in Ljubljana. And as a curator, I have a setup which was very kind of dramaturgical. It set in the middle ongoing happenings, discussions, round tables, and so on. It was equipped with very strong objects that were signaling, you know, the power, the potential that art is having, and so on. And one of these symbols was also the replica, one-to-one, of Galileo satellite, which was made in Hopkins here in Netherlands. It has 17 meters span. It was huge. And because it was a satellite, I had to find a sponsor. And I got a sponsor at the Ministry for Infrastructure, because at that time Slovenia was after having a center for Galileo communication. And I got that, I don't know, 15,000 euro. We made a satellite, so, but I didn't get the money. Huh? So you know, the event was over. It was triennial. And the event was over 1 year, second year. I said, come on, I have all papers, guys. No? You promised, you signed, give me the money. And we discovered that there is no legal way that they would transfer money to the Ministry of Culture or to somebody who is not a scientist. And talking with the Secretary General, we find out that we would need a simple agreement between the two ministries. And I wrote it, a memorandum of collaboration with art and science, you know. And I went there and said, will you sign? I said, well, it's interesting, I will give it to my minister. I went to the culture, same story. And then I was, you know, campaigning that they would come together. And they came together in one cultural event that I was organizing. And they were starting to change the commas and, you know, the letters, maybe this word yet. And after the whole session, we decided that I will make all the changes and come to them. What never happened? Well, I made the changes, but they didn't react it. At the end, they bought a satellite from us. So there is no way they would collaborate on a higher level. So the bridge is still to be built. Because you go, we started a collaboration with artists who knows somebody, you know, a scientist. And if we are ambitious, a scientist has to ask his mentor. Mentor has to ask his director. Director has to ask the boss of the institute. Boss has to ask the minister, and everything ends.
So much for structural constraints. Let's have towards the end of our session now, let's have a look at this, to stay in the metaphor, this bridge. Yeah. I tried over the course of this day to collect a few terms that have been in use for what is actually going on in this topic. We had the dialogue of artists and scientists. We had exchange, cross-fertilization, collaboration, synthesis, or co-creation. What is it at the end of the day, Victoria?
Which one is it? You mean?
Yeah.
I think all of
none of them,
above.
all of them.
No, I mean, the thing is, it's such a complex thing. When you say art, it could be 5 million things, and when you say science, it could be 5 million things. It's really about what is it that you're seeking to find out, and what drives you with a passion. Because if you have that passion, you'll find a way. You'll build a bridge. You'll find the people. You'll climb through stuff. You'll do it, and that's what some people don't like to hear. I mean, it takes years to do a project. It took 10 years to get people to go, oh yeah, we're doing this. But to me, that's not a big deal, because that's what I'm interested in, right? So if it's kind of this institutionalized thing where artists are being put together with scientists and it's so artificial, it's possible 1 out of 10 will work out, right? But ultimately, it's chemistry. you're going to work with this person for a long time, so you better like that person, right? You want to hang out with them. You want to be just like in the Science Museum, you're in a coffee shop, you want to go in a bar, you want to hang out. Any kind of production, any kind of research, it takes a long time. And I mean, I feel sorry for the kind of bureaucracy you're talking about. It's like, oh my God. But I think it's maybe because you're actually looking at institutions for the answer, and that's just endless. In fact, I started the center specifically because I wanted to avoid that. I wanted to avoid curating by committee. I wanted to avoid faculty discussions around every single move. We're even self-funded, so we figured out a way where we're really small, we don't need much money, and we self-fund. So I'm not always chasing funds because people come to us who have money, or they don't, doesn't matter, we do our stuff. So you know what I mean? It's looking at existing institutions is just so difficult that it just, I can understand why you end up in that situation. So, yeah.
You called the thing in your contribution to our book, an essay you wrote some time ago, the relation, art and science, of course, the relationship that is not existing, but yet it's functioning. So again, it's about the relationship.
Yes, relationship has to be built, you know, and not every relationship is sustainable. No, it's not for, you cannot have it for granted. If you not invest in it, it's like in, you know, in life. No, this is basically a save from Lacanian doxa, you know, where he is saying that there is no sexual relationship, and as I said, you know. We can go along very well, but there is nothing is written that we should, you know. And my experiences are that when the scientists start to frequent our place and mingle with artists, you know, the relationships are somehow more fruitful, you know. I was also using your kind of axioma that you were saying last year or 2 years ago, that the scientists who collaborate with artists innovate more.
Yeah.
No? Yeah. And this is a good starting point always, you know, when you enter the room. However, every relationship has to be constructed, no? And my wish that we would have not only political, because politically it's everywhere, you know, STEAM, STARTs, art and science, you can get even funding and so on, no? But the environment inside the scientific community is so violent, you know, that sometimes scientists doesn't want to be mentioned, you know, because their colleagues are thinking that this is not serious. You know? And we have several occasions, you know, that they self-censor themselves out of the projects. Because when we are speaking about collaborations, they are co-authors, you know.
Of course, yeah.
The artistic production is not anymore about, you know, me. You know, they are working in consortia and, you know, they share the authorship. No? And I'm really hurt when I see the situations like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's a lot of conservative scientists. You gotta find the wild guys.
They were useful.
Girls, females, males, whatever you want to call it.
Changing mindsets, yeah.
Yeah, I know. I mean, a lot of the really good scientists, young or old, are just like artists. They're pretty wild. So it's just finding them. I think if you go into the whole situation where their separation is there, it creates that kind of dichotomy, and it takes time. I said this before, so eventually it gets to the point where they actually celebrate working with an artist, and it becomes, I mean, really just to say this, talking about the bridge, it's about changing minds to the point where it's not art or science in its definition, but it's something different that just kind of wraps people's heads in a completely different consciousness. And if it gets to that point, then it doesn't matter. It's not about that. And I've seen that so many times. And I've seen situations where we walk in and it starts that way. We walk in and all they talk about is, oh, we can illustrate this for you. And my students are like, we don't want to do this. No, we start here. But slowly we'll talk and we'll discuss and we'll continue, but it doesn't happen overnight. And so if somebody has a deadline and they have budget and they have the institution pushing them to do STEAM or whatever it is, you know, then you start running into these kind of situations where it doesn't quite work. So it's tougher when it's a gallery and you're on the outside, because when we're inside, we're embedded in the Nanosystems Institute, and we're kind of this entity that people have access to look at, they see, you know, so it's different. I mean, it's tougher what you're doing for sure.
Mm. This is also why we are having educational programs, and we are working with kids. Like our gallery, it's 22 years, last 10 years went just like that. No? And those kids who are now 10, in 10 years are going to be 20. And we are massively invest in them, and not transdisciplinary, non-disciplinary. No? This is one thing. But if I'm coming one step back, speaking about the discourse between the institutions, artistic and scientific institutions, is one thing. No? But when I said that the scientific environment is violent, no, it's not only scientific environment, it's also the traditional culture is as violent as there. And we have two cases, like ongoing cases, of two artists who are having degrees in art and in science. One is holding PhD in biochemistry, one is a PhD in biology, you know? And working with them, I can feel, you know, in discussion, in their making, you know, this bias, that is, this dichotomy between the two. It's a fight.
Mm. Mm. I think this kind of brings us, thank you, brings us back in a long curve to where the entire story started, in a way, with those hybrid figures in the history of human knowledge and art. People like Leonardo da Vinci, engineer and artist, Johannes Kepler, yeah, also one of those hybrid figures. I would expect more of those hybrid personalities emerging in the future. Yeah. Yes, please.
No, it's not impossible. If you go to just Olivia Osborne is a nanotoxicologist, an artist, an awesome woman, and she's in the feminist climate change show. Rita Blake is PhD in molecular biology. She's doing art, she's doing science, she's both, right? Christina Agapakis, amazing biotech, doing all kinds of art collaborations. Now she's working in a biotech company in Boston. I mean, these are successful women scientists doing art and science, and I could keep going. And I have to tell you, the kids that we taught 10 years ago, we started tracking where are they now. One of them is working in SpaceX, one that has their own company. We checked them out, and it's like totally not art and art science. It's like it's contemporary art. Yes. Yeah, so I feel like, why is it impossible? It's not impossible. It is happening. It actually is happening. It's really about recognizing artists. By the way, I should just say that science is a new word. starting somewhere 1800 and something.
Natural philosophy.
Exactly. So
was
what
the
you were talking about, Leonardo da Vinci, etc., there was no separation before. I mean, when you just worked with the contemporary knowledge, right? So the contemporary knowledge was particular in technology and science, and you were creating with it, pushing the edge. So now suddenly it's like industrial age, and we all have to go into our little cubicles and be very specialized, and it keeps going, and then it's the corporate age that just continues that kind of way of thinking, and they want to push it even further, but it can't, because it's all dissolving, it's just falling apart, and the only question is how violent it's going to be, right? I mean, the paradigm is shifting, people are resisting, companies are resisting, institutions are resisting, traditional art world is big time resisting. I mean, where did you see our stuff there? The traditional scientists are freaking out, right, because of all of this. So I think it's just a matter of looking at the small pockets of people who are actually doing this and supporting that, not creating these artificial institutional marriages. I really have an issue with STEM, that whole deal, because I feel like it comes from this high bureaucratic engine that doesn't allow it to go from bottom up, like a grassroots thing that's happening with DIY. Look at DIY, and it's an amazing group of people who are doing all kinds of stuff. Instead of just thinking of them as fringe thing, bring them in. Things like this. Anyway, don't get me started.
Yeah, I can. Terrible. Yeah, it's a. It is possible.
I'm possible. I am possible.
But this implies Renaissance woman universal, which we should fight against that, expectation. The artist has to merge, it's a collaborative work, they have to form, they have to do it with others. It is not about me, it's not about a genius. Yeah.
No, this is where I 100% agree. I think it's collaborative work, and this is the age of me, and I'm the artist, and that's
We're not
out.
going back to the single genius
That
in his
is-
studio
that
or
is
laboratory.
not happening. It's
That's not the point.
absolutely
We
about
agree.
collective work.
We can
totally
agree about
with
that.
Yes.
We found something we could agree upon. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you, my guests, Victoria Vesna, Joika Pan. Thank you for staying with us for the whole show. Thank you to the team of Ars Electronica, technicians, curatorial team, organizational team, and the translators who went with us all that way. Thank you. Have a nice evening.
So why don't you mention the book?
I did in the beginning. I recommend looking at the book. I recommend looking at the book, whereas there's lots more of material and reflection in it than we could ever touch within those 3 hours. Thank you. It's